This is the first video in a series to create a full stack application using React, TypeScript, and webpack. In this lesson, we'll be getting set up and creating a simple Hello World app. Throughout these tutorials, I do assume that you have some knowledge using TypeScript, React, and webpack, but only a basic amount is required to follow through these lessons. Looking at what I have right now is I have a very simple repository with a package.json with just about nothing in it, just the basic stuff that you start with any empty node project. There's no dependencies and there's no scripts yet. So let's get started on actually installing our scripts. So the first thing we're going to start is with our dev dependencies, which we actually have quite a few for a very basic project. So I'll run through each one of these one by one. The first thing you'll notice, you'll see a lot of @types. This is our typings that we need to install for TypeScript. We have Node, React, React DOM, and Webpack. In earlier versions of TypeScript, you would use TSD or typings, which is basically a separate tool to install your typings. Now with 2.0, we can install them directly through npm, which is much more convenient and manageable than before. Additionally, we have tsloader, which is for Webpack, tsnode for running our scripts that are written in TypeScript. We'll be using a few of those. tslint for linting, tslint react for some extra React configuration, TypeScript, and this is TypeScript 2.0. And we also have Webpack and Webpack Dev Server. Webpack and Webpack Dev Server, we're using the 2.0 version, which aren't fully released yet, so we're using the beta versions. These are the most up-to-date versions so far. And let's install those as save dev for dev dependencies. And go to that. So that's going to take a little bit of time there. So while we're doing that, let's get going on our tsconfig, which is something that every single TypeScript project needs. tsconfig.json. Okay. And let's go through everything here by one. Looking at compiler options first, we're targeting ES5, so this should be able to compile on most recent browsers. But our module is ES 2015, which is a little bit different. The reason why we're doing this here is we're using Webpack 2.0, which natively supports import, and it can do that for tree shaking, which makes our bundle size a little bit smaller. We're using node module resolution, so just standard node mappings, JSX React, and I also have no implicit any, so you can't have any implicit any's in your code. Makes code a little bit more reliable, and strict null checks, so it removes null and undefined from the domain of any object. Something else that also makes my code more reliable, in my opinion. Source maps turned on, and then types node. That means I'm just importing the node type here, which I need for my scripts. Excluding node modules, and then we have files glob to import some of the files that we need under our source folder. Let's also create our tslint as well. So for tslint, I will be extending tslint latest, which has a lot of really good settings in it, but with a few modifications of my own. So for one, I'm adding tslint react for some React configuration, and then I'm changing two of the rules. Turning off object literal sort keys. I don't really like this rule too much. It really gets in the way a lot of times and doesn't make my code look any better at all. I think it makes it look worse, in my opinion, when you have to alphabetically sort your object keys. And then no unused variable, I'm adding React to it because I'm using stateless functional components in React, and you don't actually use a React keyword, but it will be compiled against a React create element. So as long as you have JSX, it won't complain about no unused React variable there. So that's what we need to do. And it looks like our dev dependencies finished installing a little bit ago, so let's go ahead and install our runtime dependencies. So there's actually only two of those, and that's going to be React and React DOM, which we know we already installed our typings for, and this should actually install pretty fast here. So as we saw there in our tsconfig, our source will be underneath the source folder. So let's go ahead and create that. And under source, our file is app.tsx, which will be our main application file. And for this lesson, the only source file in our project. So let's go ahead and put that code in. It's going to be very short. Okay, so let's take a look at what we have here. So we have two import statements. We're importing React from React, and then a render from React DOM so we can attach the application. Our app component is just a stateless functional component that has a header and just says hello React TypeScript. And then when we render the app component and attach it to the document element with ID of root. So very simple, very easy code there. Okay, so now we actually need to compile this and put this all together, and this is what we're using webpack for. So our webpack is going to live underneath the config folder, so we can keep it separate from the rest of our application. And I'm going to do something a little more unique here. I really do like using TypeScript whenever I can, so let's actually write our webpack configuration in TypeScript, and I'll show you how to do this after we write this here. So webpack config.ts. And let's see what we need to put in here. Okay, so I'm going to import path, which is just a node module like built in, and webpack. And I'm importing webpack just for its typings, and that's it. This actually is not going to import a real webpack during runtime. So I set project root path to the current dir and then back one. That's because we're inside the config folder, so we need to do that. And then the assets path, which is at a root of project, and it's going to be dist static. So that's a folder that we're going to create, and we're going to compile all our assets into that folder. So our actual config here, just a constant config, and I have a typing here, a webpack configuration. So you get IntelliSense, and you can type this in really easily, which is really convenient. For example, if I wanted to add another aspect to this, what's a good example here? I believe plugins, yes. So that'd be an example there. I could do plugins and get code completion on this, which is really handy to have. But we don't have any plugins right now, so we'll ignore that. So looking at our actual configuration, we have our context. Our context is our current folder and back, so we need to do that again. So now we're at a context of the root of the application. Our entry is source app.tsx, which we created earlier. Output, the path will be assets path, which is defined up here. Our public path is inside static folder. And then a file name we create is bundle.js. DevTool, using source map. And resolve. So we want to be able to import TypeScript files, which are .ts or tsx, without actually adding extension in our import statements. So to do that with Webpack, we add these extensions, and this is for Webpack 2.0. So the big difference here is everything else is in the default one except for ts and tsx. So this will allow us to import those. And then arguably the most important part of a Webpack configuration, the loaders. A lot of reason why people use Webpack anyways. In our loaders, we have a test, which is a regex expression, ts, and the x is optional, and then the loader is the ts loader. So that will compile our ts files with TypeScript then, and then we just export that as a default configuration. Now, the next thing we need here is how do we actually run a Webpack configuration within TypeScript. So the way we do this here is using a webpack config.js that will load the TypeScript version using TS node, which has a register hook. So this is how we're going to do it here. Now, as you look in our original TS config, we use module ES2015, which is not natively supported by Node.js. So we actually need a different TS config file for this. So we're going to do ts config.ts node. So this implies we're using TS node with it, .json. And this is going to look exactly like our normal TS config. In fact, you can just copy and paste it, but we're going to make a few minor changes to this. So for one, the module is now common.js, which Node supports. And then we change our file to be our webpack config.ts to put that in the scope of it. So the next thing we need is the regular webpack config file, which is webpack config.js. And this is what Webpack will load by default with no configuration. And all this is going to do is start the register hook for TypeScript and then require our TypeScript file. So how that looks here is just like this. So we require TS node, run register on it, And we see we have project, tsconfig, tsnode.json. So that means using the tsnode retro hook, use this tsconfig instead of the other one. And then module exports require config webpack config.default. Pretty easy there. And we need default because that was an export default in our tsconfig file. Let's make sure we also save this as well. So that's what we have there on webpack config. So we're almost ready to run here. The one thing we're missing here is we need an HTML file to bootstrap against. Now, as I said earlier, we're deploying from the dist folder, which we haven't created yet. So let's create that now. Dist. And then inside dist, we're going to have our index.html. So what we have here is just a very plain HTML document. We have a title for our application, and then the body. So the body has two things. It has, well, the script, which is our static bundle.js, which is the compiled bundle, and then a div with ID root. And as you saw there in app.tsx, we render and attach it to the div with the ID of root. And technically it could be any kind of component, but we're using div here. That's one of the easier ones to use. So that should be everything we need to get running. So let's see if this works here. Oh, but before we get going, we need something to actually run this with. So let's go ahead and add in a script. And this script here is just going to be a start script. So what we have here is we're going to run webpack dev server. So that starts with a very simple express server to actually run our files from on port 8080. And then we set content base of dist, so deploy files from disk. But actually it will not output the files to your disk. So we won't actually see the files because webpack dev server deploys the files from memory, making it a little bit faster. So now to run all this together, it's npm run start. And what are we missing here? Wait, what is the issue? No, we didn't save it. My bad. Let's try that again. Oh, it was running, never mind. So now it's compiling our files using TypeScript. It's going to put together all the modules and bundle together, which looks like we have about 249 modules. And it is now running. So let's pull up Chrome here. We have localhost 8080. And there it is, hello React TypeScript. So it only takes a few minutes to get this whole thing together. Very easy. In future videos, we'll be adding configuration, making this a better developer experience, and then adding more functionality. And eventually we'll have a full stack example with a backend API, a lot of front-end features. Should be really cool when we're all done.